We're live. All right.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm delighted to have you all join the inaugural CETI Enchanted Tech Summer Festival, focused on wearables and costumes. As part of this festival, which came together this summer, we have a series of workshops and amazing speakers, and you'll be hearing one of them next, and talks, demos, and all coming together with a show on August 21st if you want to join. Everything will be streamed, so you can watch it on our CETI YouTube channel, and we will also have videos later of everything captioned for you. This whole series was possible because of the generous support of the Oregon Community Foundation and of Portland State University, which gave us this gorgeous space and lab. You can find out more. We have a few speakers left this afternoon and tomorrow, and they will still be on the site, so come and see them whenever you can. And I'm going to introduce, just mention our speaker, Sophy Wong, who's going to be talking about digital fabrication for wearable design. But I will first introduce Helen Lee, who's going to moderate the talk, and we'll tell you more about Sophy. And Helen is an amazing artist who does all sorts of sort of magical and possible things with wearables and music, and taught one of the workshops. So you should catch her workshops on the CETI YouTube as part of the Enchanted Tech Festival as well. So on that note, I'll hand it off to Helen, who's going to be, we will have, maybe I should say one more thing, which is Sophie's going to be talking and giving a presentation, and at the end of this time we will have questions. Helen will be asking some, but put some in the chat. If you want to continue the conversation for the next few days, and also join all the other people who are working on these workshops, join the CETI Discord channel. Send email to hello@ceti.institute, or find us on our website at just ceti.institute to sort of find out how to talk to us a little bit more and join our projects. Thanks.
Thank you, Nandini. So I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you all to Sophy Wong, who is an amazing artist, designer, who creates these incredible wearable costumes and fashion tech. I've had the privilege of being able to see her speak a number of times over the years at various hardware hacking events, and her work is always extremely exciting. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the wonderful Sophy Wong. Yay!
Hello. Thank you so much for having me be part of this, Helen and Nandini. It's really exciting. And I'm just going to jump in because I have bazillions of slides to share. So I'm going to share my screen, and just give me a minute to press the right buttons. Hold on one sec.
It's all good. Your workshop's looking gorgeous, Sophy, I have to say.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing some reorganizing in my brain and physically in the space, and that is pretty exciting for me. But I think I found the right button, so here we go.
All right, here we go. So let me add that to the stream, and I'm gonna let you get on with your day here, Nandini, and remove you, but we'll see you later. All right, here we go. All yours, Sophy, all yours.
Okay, great. Yeah, and you can see my slides there, okay?
Yeah, I can see your slides perfectly. I will just say, anybody
fantastic.
who has any questions during the comments, you can add them into the comments in the chat. Look, so we've got Anne Barella here with us saying, yay. We've got Ashley here who's saying, woohoo, thanks for joining us, Ashley. And Anne says, you both have outstanding workshops. This is true. We have put quite a lot of effort into making cute workshops. So if anybody out there who's watching wants to chime in at any point, you can leave a comment on YouTube, or you can at either of us on Twitter. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll be posing all of your questions to Sophy. So there we are. Without further ado, off you go.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm Sophy Wong. I'm a designer and an artist and a maker, and I like to make wearable tech. I like to make costumes. I like to make fashion. A lot of people who are already familiar with my work know me as someone who infuses technology into my finished projects. Also, I like to use technology and digital fabrication techniques in the creation of my projects. And my projects end up looking something like this. Sometimes it's sometimes the technology is really present in the finished piece, and sometimes it's more of like an aesthetic application of technology. And this is an example of that. This is like an LED fashion accessory kind of piece. And sometimes there's a functional aspect to the technology that I'm integrating. So this is a temperature sensing skirt. And so the lights in the skirt change color according to the ambient temperature of the environment. And sometimes I just like to make things that are fun and visually exciting. So costumes, fashion. I really just like to explore how I can use technology for creative expression, and my sort of vehicle and medium for that is the human body. And that's kind of why my things end up being wearable. This is an example of a project that combines both of those things, using technology in the creation process and integrating technology into the finished piece. This is an LED jacket that I used 3D printing on fabric as a technique to create the diffusers that the lights are coming through in the back of the jacket. But I'm going to talk mostly today about how I use technology in my creation process. So I'm going to talk mostly about these two pieces, and we'll touch briefly on some of the things that ended up helping me figure out that more complicated LED jacket piece. But these two pieces are my spacesuit and my 3D printed dress, and they're both really good examples of how I integrate technology into my work and my process. So I'm going to start with my spacesuit. And this spacesuit is obviously a fantasy spacesuit. It's a costume piece, and it's made out of, it's an original design that I created. So it's not based on any existing costume or any real existing spacesuit. But this is really fabricated with a lot of different techniques. So it uses laser cut foam for most of the external pieces, the rigid pieces. There's a fabric base suit there that I sewed from scratch, and some gloves, and the boots have some fabric pieces on them. The helmet is a plastic helmet that I added EVA foam on top of. And there's some electronics sort of woven in and out of these pieces. And really, my goal for doing this was I wanted to create my idea of my dream spacesuit. And so I started with inspiration and research. All of my projects start with research. And my favorite spacesuits are these sort of science fiction, fantasy, like wild looking spacesuits. And I really, as I was looking through inspiration for this, I was really drawn to these images of people in helmets with this really dramatic lighting. And they're all really kind of lit from the inside. Space around them is like very dark. And this was just really compelling to me. This is like the dream that I've had for the kind of spacesuit that I wanted. So I really don't care that these are not representational of actual functional space helmets, which we now have today. They are not lit from the inside, but for cinematic purposes, for expressive purposes, I love having that light on the inside. So that's really what I wanted. So since I was fixated on the helmet, I started with the helmet, and I started with this costume helmet that I just purchased. And my goal was to transform this helmet completely and just make it as different, just push it as far from the original piece as possible, keeping the things that I liked about the original helmet and just totally transforming anything that didn't fit my vision of what I wanted. And so I started with this pretty common technique, a really fantastic cosplay technique of patterning directly off of an object. So this is some blue tape that I laid down onto the helmet. I drew the shapes that I wanted, and then I cut them out and I scanned them into my computer. And this is something that is really fundamental to my process. I like to use digital workflows and technology in the production of my pieces, because my pieces are really made for working on a human body, for being present in this physical space. I need to bridge that gap between the physical world and the digital world. And this is usually how I do it. I just scan things into my computer. Here's what the scan looks like. And then I digitize it. And usually I use Adobe Illustrator. And then I can use those digital files to cut the piece out on my laser cutter. And this is just such a satisfying experience. EVA foam, it cuts like butter in a laser cutter, and you get these really precise shapes. So then I take those shapes and I applied them to the outside of the helmet, and I just tried to change the shape of the helmet, just visually kind of break up that shape as much as possible. And I wanted to develop some kind of like complexity in the piece. And I thought that I could do that by using texture and pattern in an applied way to create the illusion of different materials. So EVA foam was my main material for transforming this helmet, but I didn't want you to necessarily look at the helmet when it was finished and see that it was all made out of the same material. So I kind of broke it up by developing these different textures and patterns that I was applying to the surface. And the cool thing about laser cutting is it's not just a cutting tool. You can also use it to score design lines on the surface of your material. I used it to engrave that sort of hexagonal pattern to kind of turn that into maybe something that could look a bit like a filtering material or something other than a rigid material. And then I kind of completed that material story with paint. So I decided which pieces I wanted to feel like rigid metal, and I painted those to look like a deep kind of oiled bronze. And then the materials that I wanted to feel more flexible, like more like technical fabrics or something, I painted blue, so you can see that kind of hexagonal pattern. And the gold I wanted to use as sort of a highlighting element to maybe suggest that there's another kind of metal involved. And then, of course, there's some aspects of the helmet that I couldn't change. So the visor was blue to begin with. And I knew that was going to be a really big element. It's right over the front of my face. So I decided to, instead of trying to change that or cover it up, I decided to make that seem intentional. So I leaned into the color blue and I used it as the base color for the helmet and really the base color for the whole suit. I added some electronics, obviously had to get the lights in there. So here's a look at the internal lights going in to the inner part of the helmet, shining directly onto my face. And then that creates a really bright look on the inside of the face, and it kind of makes the external part of the helmet sort of go dark when you're in a dark environment. So I wanted to get some point lights as external lights on the shining outward as well. And I kept adding bits and pieces and kind of just observing the helmet and just kind of changing it as I went to pull things out that I liked and to push things back that I wanted to hide. And it really did transform. By the end, I put it on and I was like, yeah, this is definitely the helmet that I wanted. This is like the feeling that I wanted to get out of it. But I immediately realized that I needed the rest of the suit to go along with the space helmet. So I just went back to the same kind of process. I start with inspiration, I looked at all my favorite spacesuits in movies, and I just kind of tried to decide what I wanted to take from them and what I wanted to leave behind. And when I kind of had an idea of what I wanted, I sketched out some ideas this time. As I thought, I really want this to match the helmet, so I really want to know exactly what I'm going to build before I jump into the suit. And that from there, it's basically the same process as building the helmet. I really started with patterning off of my body, so similar process to patterning directly off the helmet, but this time the object I'm patterning off of is just my body. So again, this is another cosplay technique where you wrap yourself up in plastic and draw the shape that you want to create, and then use that to develop your pattern. And I kept kind of working through my design piece by piece and just tried to expand the visual language and the ideas that I created for the helmet into the rest of the spacesuit, checking it, checking the form at many points throughout the process. When I work in a digital workflow, I'm constantly printing things out, cutting them out, taping them up to see if I'm really on the right track and if it's going to fit the way I want it to fit when I'm done. And this is a look at the pattern, sort of the halfway point in my digital workflow process here, where I'm kind of creating the pattern on my computer, printing it out and outputting it. And you can see how flat these shapes are, particularly when I get to the cutting point. You can see the piece that comes out of the laser cutter. That foam is so flat, but when you hit it with some heat and you close up those darts, it really curves nicely around the human body, and you can see that like 3D shape developing. So this is really a 2D process that I'm using to create something that has 3D volume. And it's kind of a nice iterative process where I'm looking at the piece as it's developing and I'm kind of seeing like what I think it's missing, what I want to add. I can try it. I can actually just try it with paper before I go to cutting into my foam. And just adding things, building up the layers and kind of breaking into that 3D space just kind of iteratively, because the laser cutting foam is so quick. It's so quick, and it's a really nice process that feels a bit more organic than you would think for something that's so digital. And then the really nice thing about laser cutting foam is it's such a precise cut that you can leave a lot of edges visible. You don't have to do a lot of touch up after the fact. In fact, I really didn't hide any of the seam lines on my piece. I figured out that I could hide them in plain sight, essentially, by placing those cut lines in the center of my surface design, and they just kind of disappear because they're so precise. When I glue those pieces together, it just looks like another score line. So it saved me a lot of time. And it's the same sealing and painting process. When you get to the primer process, the primer step of the process, it really shows how those sharp laser cutter lines and those engraved textures are just transforming the materials. They really start to look like different pieces. Then the painting and the weathering, I just did, again, like expanding the visual material language that I was creating on the helmet, just expanding that to make the rest of the suit feel like it was all family together. And this is the finished suit, and I really like how it turned out. I love that the precision of the laser cutting and the engraving textures, it just kind of makes it feel like these materials are real. And I was really, this was the first time that I committed so heavily to this kind of digital fabrication workflow, and I was really happy with how much that helped me create the illusion of like an industry material, like a really heavy material that required more than just human hands to make it. And it ended up being a fairly convincing fantasy spacesuit. All these details were kind of little bits and pieces that I picked out of my inspiration and just put it together to create my vision. And here's a look at those lights from the outside. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear this, but I made them into sound activated lights so that when I talk, they kind of flash. And then this was kind of an unexpected thing that happened. My spacesuit ended up in a music video. So there was a director that contacted me. He was making a sci-fi story music video for this rock band called Saul. And he needed a spacesuit for his actress and asked me if he could rent it. And I said, that sounds amazing. You should totally take it and do it. And so I sent my spacesuit out to the Badlands, and they made this amazing video that just made the suit look incredible. So that was really a dream come true for me. And yeah, I hope to do more of that kind of work in the future. So that was, like I said, the spacesuit was really a 2D kind of a process, but I want to also talk about 3D processes, and particularly 3D printing, because that's another really exciting way that I like to kind of integrate technology into the pieces that I'm creating. And so this is a project that it's basically almost done. It's like 95% done. But it's a full dress. I wanted to see if I could create a full body garment using only this technique of 3D printing onto fabric. So if you're not familiar with 3D printing on fabric, it's this really cool process that I did not invent at all, by the way. There are plenty of other people that are doing really cool things with this process. And if you want to find out more about them, you should definitely look up David Shorey, who kind of pioneered this technique and popularized it. But basically, what it is if you have this kind of cellular design, so you can see those hexagons are individual hexagons. They're not touching. You can 3D print that model on your regular 3D printer, FDM 3D printer, and insert a layer of meshed fabric between the first two layers. So you let one layer print, you pause your printer, you insert the fabric, and then you resume the printer. And basically what you get is a 3D print that has fabric sandwiched between the first two layers, and you get this flexible kind of material. And I'll show you what that looks like. So your 3D model might look something like this, and here's how it looks when it's printed out. It has this great flexibility to it. It has kind of a really unique drape that you can control with the shape of the 3D print of the 3D model that you're creating. So I find that really, really exciting from a design perspective and a materials perspective. And I wanted to kind of explore that more. And so I kind of started looking at different kinds of shapes, playing with the size and shape of the printed pieces versus the size and shape of the spaces between the plastic areas, and achieving kind of different looks and different properties purely through this application of design. And it's really interesting. I'm finding ways to create new like behaviors in the material, and I'm creating these properties in the fabric that don't really exist with traditional woven fabrics that you can buy. And I'm experimenting with some transparency and different draping behaviors with application of weight in different areas in the print. And I'm getting these really unique kind of draping properties that are super exciting. So this piece has a little more volume coming up off of the surface of the fabric. And it's just like, it feels so weird. Like holding it in your hand is just really exciting for me. And so I wanted to turn this into a full dress. And it was really an experiment. I just wanted to see if it could be done, first of all, if I could do it. So I didn't really sweat too much about the aesthetic kind of visual concept for the piece. I just kind of pulled some interesting visual inspiration that I thought would be a nice driver for what this thing could look like. But I really wanted to spend most of my time developing the technique. So I've got some Klingons on there from the first season of Discovery that I just love the way they look. And there's some pieces there that are from one of my favorite Japanese pop groups called Perfume. They have a lot of, their costumes are always very feminine, but they also use a lot of technology in their performances and in their garments, and they're just beautiful. So I thought I'll just prime my brain with some of those ideas and then see what comes out of it when I apply this 3D printed fabric technique to it. So I started by drafting a really simple bodice, but I needed to kind of think about it differently from the way that you would usually think about drafting a bodice that you're just going to sew out of fabric. I knew I would have to cut this up into a lot of smaller pieces that I could fit onto my 3D printer. And my 3D printer bed is about 12 inches by 12 inches. So I get about 10 inches square of usable space because I've got to leave some room for taping the fabric down. So I had to just make sure that all of these sections I was creating in my garment could be cut up to fit on the bed like that. And I used the samples that I generated as kind of swatches, and I just kind of selected a few that I thought might work well with this first attempt at turning it into a full garment. And then this is a way that I like to work that's kind of an iterative process that also uses the digital workflow. So I sometimes like to work on my mock-up and then just stop, take a photo of my mock-up, and then print that photo out and sketch directly on the photo. And it kind of just helps me really quickly iterate without having to like draw a sketch completely from scratch and without having to sew up a whole new mock-up. I can just really quickly visualize on the piece that I'm working on right there what direction I might want to go in next. So when I got something that I really liked and I thought would work, I cut my mock-up apart and I traced it, and I scanned the tracings into my computer. And then it's the same process of digitizing it in Illustrator. And then I went one further step to get it into 3D. So then I took those outlines, the pattern pieces, and I pulled them into Fusion 360 so I could create my 3D models. And then I printed out the pieces and I started combining the pieces together. And it's really exciting to kind of see all of these pieces fitting together and getting these massive swaths of the draping 3D printed fabric. This material that I'm using, the filament that I'm using, is called Wizard's Voodoo from Filamentum. And it's just this beautiful iridescent purple filament. I made a conscious choice to print the whole thing out of the same color because I really wanted the focus to be on the shapes that I was creating and the surface pattern design that I was creating. So I didn't want to break that up with color. So, but I did want to still have it be a really beautiful piece. So I chose this really iridescent color that just kind of, it has this kind of oil slick shine quality to it. And I discovered that I could connect the pieces together really seamlessly with my 3D pen. So this is another issue that I always run into when I'm using a digital fabrication technique like a laser cutter or a 3D printer or a CNC mill, is you really need to be conscious of the size that you can output from that machine. And so I knew I would have to combine pieces together. And it turns out that I can use my 3D pen sort of like a glue gun to kind of put the pieces together in a really seamless way. So I kind of overlap the pieces. Like you can see here, I cut off the seam allowance from one piece. I'm laying it directly next to the piece I want to connect it to. And then I flip it over and I use my 3D pen to kind of weld that seam allowance to the back of the other piece. And what you get is this really invisible connection between the two pieces, and it flows as if it was printed like that in a machine. So I really love that I discovered this technique, and I want to apply it and kind of take it further in other projects. And the finished piece, when it's all together and I've got all of my pattern pieces together, it really drapes really well on the body. People ask me like what it feels like. It's heavy. It feels like wearing like a sequined gown or something. It's got a lot of weight to it, and it feels quite nice. It's like maybe one of those like comforting like heavy blankets, you know. And this is the skirt kind of coming together. So this represents probably 4, 8, 10 or 12 pieces right here, just kind of all combined together. Here's the back of the skirt, and you can kind of see those connection points where the pieces are being welded together. And here's the top and the bottom and they're just not connected. So it's almost done, but like I got to this point where I'm seeing the dress kind of coming together, and it's like it hit me so hard. I was like, oh my God, I want to make other things. So it kind of set my brain going. I've gone on a few other tangents, and I will finish this piece. I will. But for right now, it's kind of still on my form in this state. And I just love that I get to see it every day. I think one day when it's finished, I'm also doing a lining for the inside of it, because obviously it's sort of like this mesh material that you can see through. So it's kind of like switching gears to sewing at this point, because I want to make a really nice silk lining for it. So, but yeah, that's basically the idea. I got to this idea. I was like, I want to go, I have more ideas, and I want to go further. But that's a 3D printed dress, and that's one technique for working in the digital world, but outputting in a 3D or physical world. I'm also going into these other ideas where I'm finding other ways to do that. So I'm scanning my head, scanning my face, scanning my body, and then using those scans to create work. So this is a scan of my body. I was wearing a wig cap, so that's why I have no hair. And here is an example of using that scan to create. So I printed out just the face, just my face, 3D printed it. You can see that on the left. And then on the right is a cement casting that I made of that print. And then I used that cement casting as a base to sculpt on with clay. And then I cast that clay sculpt in silicone and created a mask that fits my face perfectly. So this is for a costume that I'm building. And then also, so that was an example of using that 3D print to output something physical that I could sculpt on, but I also am experimenting with sculpting directly on the 3D scan, just creating a 3D model of something that I wanted to output, printing out these glasses, and they, again, like fit my face perfectly. And honestly, it's the first time that's ever happened that I could put a pair of glasses on and the little ear thing is like perfectly over my ear and it fits my nose perfectly. So it's pretty exciting, especially if I want to do more work for other people, which I do. I think scanning a person is just so next level beyond just taking measurements. So excited to explore this more. So if you want to know what I'm up to, I'm updating my website, so you can check that out. And if you want to know more about the spacesuit and some of my other wearable projects, they were featured on Tested. So there's a great video over on Tested you can check out. I also have quite a few tutorials out there in the world. I did a tutorial on the laser cutting portion of my spacesuit, which is in one of the issues of Make magazine from last years ago. And I did a tutorial for Hackspace about putting the lights into my space helmet and also building that 3D printed jacket with the LEDs in it. And those are also in my wearable tech projects book, which you can find at that really, really long URL there. You can also just go to my website. And then, of course, you can follow me on socials to see what I'm up to. And that's basically all I've got. That's all I've got for today. Thank you.
Sophie, this is the point where everybody like breaks into rounds of applause. Like I love hearing you speak. I always learn a new technique when I listen to one of your talks. I'm like, oh wow, it's so clever. Okay, so I've got first of all, amazing. Congratulations. That was
thank
so
you.
Thank you. I mean, I want to show you some of the reactions here. Lots of them are like just mind blowing, kind of like, ooh, everybody loves it. But I do also have some questions for you. Let's start off with one from the YouTube comments. So Ashley has asked, that shows off so many amazing projects. Agree, Ashley. Love the sci-fi inspiration. And she's curious to know what your favorite project is and why.
Oh, and this always changes for me. I feel like it's like usually my latest project is my favorite project. But I think right now and I think I don't know, something happened to me in the pandemic where I was just like, I can't look at anything I'm making right now. So it's kind of fun to kind of pick it back up again and look at the things that are still lingering around my studio. And I really think right now, my 3D printed dress, I'm really excited to do more work in that area. And I just feel like, I think it just kind of hit me when I was talking just now, like why it's stuck at 95%. And I think it's because like, it just makes me want to go further. Like I learned so much doing that project and getting to that point in the process that now I feel like I want to do everything that I did there like differently. And I just like, I don't want to waste time finishing this one. I just want to make the next one, you know? So I think right now, where I am in my brain, I'm really interested in the 3D printing on fabric. So I think that's probably my current favorite.
That's great, and you're really doing some stuff that I've not seen out there. You know, the level and the geometric patterns on the 3D printing on the flexible material. It's just wonderful. I can't wait to see what you do with it next. But I do want to. I want to ask you one of my own questions. I'm being greedy here. There are other questions to ask, but I mean, I've always loved that you obviously draw such an inspiration from science fiction, and I was wondering, like, and some of the work that I've seen you do over the years, you've drawn from all sorts of different science fiction worlds. But I was wondering, like, are there any particular universes, worlds, or kind of creative, like movies or books or whatever that you find yourself being drawn back to again and again?
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say there's three. And I don't know why people don't talk about this movie so much, but Oblivion, which is I can't remember what year it came out, but it's Tom Cruise. However you feel about Tom Cruise, this movie's amazing. And I think it's the visual. For me, this movie is so tight on visual design. It's like it's almost like a music video. It's almost like they took a music video, a very stylized futuristic music video, and like turned it into a film. So for me, that film influences me a lot. I think about it a lot when I'm thinking about new projects I want to make. I always kind of think like, I would love to make something that came from that universe and that fits into that world. And it also is a really nice, oh, thank you, 2013. My goodness, are you kidding me? Let me just absorb that for a moment. Yeah, but it's still so beautiful. And Kim and I, my husband, is also really we love science fiction and we watch that movie often. So that one, also 2001: A Space Odyssey is again like really visually just so compelling. And I think like really like a hallmark. Like it's just there's so much derivative work that comes from that vision, and so it, even though like, I mean, Anne, can you tell us when that movie came out? Because I think it was like 69. I mean, that is so much older, you know?
Before our time, Sophie.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it was so compelling a vision that people are still referencing it today. And so I think like, and it also represents like one version of science fiction, because I think there are these models, these like archetypes of futuristic sci-fi movies. There's like the clean version where like, I always think it must mean that somehow the world got wiped out and we started over, because like, how could it possibly be that clean if it was an evolution of today? So that's like, I kind of think of 2001 as kind of like super clean. I think of like Oblivion has sort of this like element of like clean layered onto like a desolate world. 1968. Oh, I was close.
Thank you.
And then there's like the other end of the spectrum. So there's like super clean, like THX 1138 world. And then there's the other end of the spectrum that's like gritty, dirty. It's evolved from today. And that's like Blade Runner. And Blade Runner is like the other kind of movie that I always go back to. It's like 2001, A Space Odyssey, THX1138. I just like to make a spectrum of like where all the science fiction futures lie on this line between like, you know, sterile utopia and, you know, gritty, realistic, post-apocalyptic something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to move on to another question. We have got this, which says, this is very cool. How do you do the scanning part to get accurate dimensions?
Yeah, so that's been a struggle in 2D and in 3D. But my background is in graphic design, so I've kind of just have it built into my DNA at this point that I'm constantly rechecking dimensions and measurements. It's really easy to just distort something in that process. So when I'm doing 2D, for example, like scanning my patterns in and then digitizing them in Illustrator, I just have to manually check those units. And I'm scanning. So basically, I'm scanning at 300 DPI, and then or PPI, and then I'm making sure that my file format and my workspace is set up in Illustrator to also be 300 PPI. So I'm never deviating from the original resolution, and then I'm printing it out at the same resolution. That's something that I'm always kind of tracking in the 2D workflow. And then in 3D, oh, and then the other trick for that is I'm kind of making the switch to DXF files instead of SVGs wherever possible, because SVGs don't really keep the units, I believe, but DXF files, oh gosh, they keep everything. They keep your units, they keep your layers. If you bring a DXF file into, if you bring a layered file from Illustrator and you save it as a DXF, and then you bring that into something like Fusion 360, you can access the layer information and you can say, I want to bring this layer in and not that layer. So, so that's a trick that I've recently learned. I love DXFs.
Yeah, again, Sophie, you are improving everyone's practice by giving these amazing I didn't know that, and I've had so much trouble with the importing of this for my own digital fabrication. So honestly, I didn't realize that about DXS. So thanks for another amazing.
I mean, yeah, I've only discovered these things because I've had the hours of frustration too. Of I'm like, why is this not the right size? And just I still mess it up. You know, it's like I now have this like reflex that whenever I move from one program to another, and I really move through a lot of programs in my process. Like I might start in Illustrator and go into Fusion, and then go into Mesh Mixer, and then go back into Fusion, and then go into Kira for slicing. And then, you know, so I have this reflex now that whenever I switch to a new app or new program, I have to check what did I lose? What got distorted? Check the measurements and check the units. And I'm still like accidentally 3D printing things and they're like that big when I need them to be this big. And I'm like, oh, you know.
All right. So next question. Yeah, it is. It is. I tend to use like a little 1 inch by 1 inch square, and I put those in my 2D files. And
yeah.
I just put it in there and then remove it in the final, you know, because that's like
so great.
There's so much different. There's so many different like laser cutting softwares that are attached to different laser cutting machines. It's like, yeah. Anyway, so next question from the YouTube, from your adoring audience, is someone who's asked if you've had any luck printing any other types of joints outside of your 3D printed dress, or is this in your plans for the next iteration?
Yeah, I have not yet tackled joints, and how astutely observed that is. There aren't any joints really in my dress, and the point at which really I think the closest thing to a joint in my dress is the waist area, and I've chosen to kind of leave that disconnected at this point. I'm kind of torn because I'm a little worried about the weight and really creating all of that weight just being supported on the shoulders. So I believe I'm going to insert a little waist stay there so that it's kind of supported on the waist. But I do need to think about how, how this material is going to act when I'm bending at the waist, kind of like a giant joint. But in my next iterations, I do want to do some shoulder. I think I'll probably start with shoulders. And I think it'll be pretty forgiving. And honestly, legs, pants are going to be amazing, because look at how and I have my little box of samples here. Look at how these pieces drape when they're long. Oh, I have to grab the salmon. The only one I have is the one that looks like salmon. Basically.
Oh,
but you
yeah.
know, when you get a nice long piece like this, you know, bending over a joint, I think is going to be fantastic. If I can solve, you know, the edges, it's probably going to be a bit of a hybrid between actual printed fabric and just bare areas, just to create some space in there. But yeah, I want to do a glove. I really want to do a glove, because I think fingers, I think that kind of motion will create some really interesting, I don't have terminology for this, but I need to think about, like, you know, what it means when it lifts off of the fabric, you know, like kind of extension. I think that would be really cool.
Super cool. Exciting. All right, I've got another question. This is from Ashley. Ashley is a really awesome person. She's Czech Tech on Twitter. You probably already follow her, but she does lots of really interesting stuff on haptics. And this is a question I'd like to know as well. So this is I'm going to mash up Ashley's question with the question that I wanted to ask you. So her question is: as a haptics nerd, I'm curious if/how Sophy has used tactile technology in projects, and that marries in very well with the question that I was going to ask you. Is like, as a maker, you've all, like, everyone's got their favorite microcontrollers or their sensors that they know inside out, you know, like, what are your favorite pieces of tech to use? Sensors, inputs, outputs, controllers, like what's your bag? What's your go-to tech that you love?
Yeah, so I have not done tactile technology in my projects, but I would love to. And I think that kind of goes into sort of a more not functional aspect in terms of like fulfilling a need, but like functional in terms of, you know, an output from the piece. And usually my go-to output, and I hope this doesn't sound so boring, but my usual output is light, because a lot of my work is, the point of it is sort of aesthetic. So I'm often thinking about how the piece is going to function visually when it's done. How is it going to photograph, or how is it going to move in a video? What is the visual communication aspect of it? And that probably goes back to my graphic design roots, where I'm just kind of like really a visual person. And light is such a powerful way to communicate visually. You know, it's the way that I've been sort of using, it's the way that I've been saying this piece has technology in it. So even if I do something that is has a more functional aspect, like a purse that has a sensor built into it, or is connected to the internet, or whatever it is, I will always have a light component, because I think that it's communicating. It's like a way to communicate that the piece is doing something. So it's kind of, lights are kind of my go-to. And then I think, like, you know, obviously Adafruit NeoPixels are like my drug. They're just so satisfying. They're really easy to use. And they're just, you know, I think like what I want to do is like explore more ways to do it. I think like I've kind of done it the same way in a lot of my projects, and but I think there's more like to wring out of it. Like, I think I can be a little more creative with it and explore how to do it in new ways. And I think that's coming. Like, I'm kind of in a place where I'm exploring like why I'm doing these things. Like, I've done a lot of projects in the past where I'm like, I just want to learn the technique and then like demonstrate the technique. But now I'm like, okay, I've amassed these skills and this knowledge, and I want to like what am I going to produce with all of that? So Yeah, that's kind of a really roundabout, not quite answer.
That's great. Well, actually, I've got a whole box of really awesome haptic tech that Ashley sent me. So, and you need to come down to Portland and we'll have a hack session.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait. I can't wait.
I know. We're not far away from each other these days. I've got hang on, we've got another 10 minutes, so there's time for a couple more questions before we leave. But there's one more from the audience here saying, what types of projects are you thinking of for your next 3D printed fabric? I also wanted to say, there's absolutely loads of people who are saying they're taking notes and that they're absolutely loving your presentation and saying it's really, really cool. So lots of amazing positive feedback coming in on the chat here. So they get
I'm
Sophie.
so glad. I'm so glad. And I think like that's so great. Like I also like really want to encourage people like 3D printing on fabric. Like there's so many other people doing it, doing really cool stuff with it. Check out David Shorey, check out Billy Rubin, and then see who they are referencing there. And what's really interesting is because it's kind of so new, you know, people are doing really different things. Like David Shorey, he's printing on all kinds of stuff. Like I'm pretty much just sticking to this kind of nylon mesh fabric. And because it integrates really well with what I want to do, which is like combine it with other fabric, and it kind of disappears when I sew it onto another piece of fabric. But he's printing on like steel mesh and window screens and paper,
Wow.
you know, like it's amazing. So definitely check out those other people too. For my next projects with 3D printing on fabric, I want to do, so my original idea for the first dress that I did, it was way too ambitious for one idea, so I had to scale it back. But I wanted to get technology into it, obviously. I want to get lights into it. So I wanted to do some of that diffusion that I did on the jacket and get some illumination into the 3D printed pieces and into the 3D printed fabric. And then I wanted to also have that be driven by some kind of sensor that was, you know, taking input in from the environment or whatever. And so I do want to eventually get to that point. But I think to the earlier questions point is I want to explore first more ways that 3D printing on fabric in the form of a garment, you know, it's going to work in the form of a garment. So I want to first make some pieces that go on different parts of the body. So I want to do a glove. I'd like to do a shoe. Like I want to do a shoe covering, like a shoe, like use an existing shoe as a base and then create like a fabric covering that goes on it. I want to kind of think of it as like an accessory piece, you know? I actually really want to do a wig, like I don't know where my head form is right now, but I'm kind of thinking of ways that I can create like basically like a headdress and a wig like under piece, and the 3D printed pieces will kind of come off of it. Like I'm going to try to avoid like the old I know immediately my brain kind of goes to like the old Hollywood representations of you know, Egyptian historical wigs, but I don't want to go there. But in terms of construction, I'm thinking it might be something like that, where it's tethered up here and the pieces are flowing down. And I just think you'll get some like really interesting drape around the face that way. So yeah,
That's
lots of
super cool.
ideas, and I just need to get to them.
And one final question, before I bring Nandini back in to boot us off to the next talk. We'd love to know, how did you find your way into this field? You mentioned that you started out as a designer, but like this is, I mean, obviously your design skills have come with you to this new genre of activity. But how did you get started in these modern technologies and modern like digital fabrication? When, you know, yeah.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. Like the technology aspect really started with e-textiles for me, because I didn't know that I could integrate technology into the things that I was making until I discovered e-textiles. I've always been interested in technology. I've always loved technology. I've always kind of been like an early adopter of new things as whenever I could. But when I was a kid, I wasn't the kind of person that would just take devices apart and learn about them. That just isn't my origin. I grew up, thinking that technology was super expensive and super precious, and like there's no way I'm gonna break that, beta cassette player. So so I kind of just thought of technology as these like magical boxes that did things, and I didn't know how they worked inside, and they were probably made by robots, And then I got to a point where I was kind of exploring fashion, and my husband is he's always been a coder, programmer, computer brilliant person, and so I definitely got some influence from him and some encouragement from him, and when I discovered that e-textiles were actually a thing, I felt like I could give it a try, and it really took. Like, I was so excited that I could manipulate these things that I didn't think I could even understand before, and then that kind of led to integrating more technology. Say that again?
Like, I'm just curious, like, how long has this process taken? Like, so like, like how long has it been since you started experimenting with e-textiles to get to this point where you are now?
Oh my gosh, a long time. In fact, I just was looking in my photos because I was looking for old photos of projects. And oh my gosh, wait. So Anne said that the movie Oblivion came out in 2013. So, correct. I mean, it must have been like, I think we got our first 3D printer in God, I don't even know. I can't even, how many years is it since 2013? I'm just going to say it's probably been like 10 years,
Yeah.
Like a long time. It's been a long arc for me just in general to figure out what I want to do with my life. And I still don't quite know. But it's been a meandering path, but it's not been, none of it has been wasted, because I picked up things along the way, and that has been sort of steering me into this path. And I've only kind of recently realized that digital fabrication and like a digital workflow is like the unique thing about how I work. I've just been doing things that were interesting to me. I didn't like say that I wanted this to be my artist statement, until someone's like, what's your artist statement? And then you're like, oh God.
Oh, we got to make one of those now, do we? Okay.
Who am I? What do I do? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's always shocking. I'm just going to add Nandini back into the stream now, because we are terrifyingly, somehow nearly an hour has passed since we started, and I feel like it's just flown past because you've taught me so much, and it's been a delight to listen to you speak. But let me just bring Nandini back in. Hi there, Nandini.
Hello. I just wanted to thank you both for this amazing conversation. Just watching both of you talk, but and especially with all of your slides and projects and everything, Sophie, is just always so inspiring. And it makes me want to drop everything I do and try to find my way down this path. And it's so exciting. I feel like, oh, this is what I want to learn, and I'm going to figure this out and find my way into it. So it is incredibly inspiring, and I'm so grateful to have you both really.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and I wanted to tell all of you watching, when you should watch this, share this with friends, share it on social media. But we're going to hopefully continue the conversation on the CETI Discord. So send email to hello@ceti.institute to get a link to the Discord and continue this conversation with Sophie and with Helen and with lots of other people. But and come back. We will be doing more of these talks. And
we have another talk in 15 minutes, I believe.
Yeah. Crystal Curtis is going to join us in 15 minutes. And come down to the lab. We're going to have these projects, and hopefully we can get Sophie to come and visit, do some workshops, just play. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
So, quick announcement. So after this stream is ended shortly, in 15 minutes, I'll be talking to a signed artist called Crystal Cortez. And also after that will be, you'll know this one, Sophie, will be Jorvan Moss. He's him tonight. So Jorvan Moss will find out our afternoon of artist talks. And he's an incredible artist, makes really cool robotics. So you don't want to miss that. But thank you all for watching, and thank you all for commenting and participating and asking questions. That's what makes it really engaging for us to be able to sit here. It's kind of difficult, isn't it, giving talks in front of an audience that isn't in front of you. But you did an amazing job, Sophie. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. And Nandini, thank you so much for giving us this platform. We'll see you all again at the next talk, and catch you later. All right. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.